Adam, we've just returned from Barcelona, from the Fira, to our visit Mobile World Congress.
Busy couple of days.
A busy couple of days, a lot of walking, a lot of steps.
Yes.
A lot of halls visited, a lot of brands seen. So I think it would be really great to discuss some of what we saw, what we learned, best bits.
Absolutely.
All things in between.
Sounds good to me.
For anyone who's unfamiliar with Mobile World Congress, it's obviously based in Barcelona at the Fira, which is one of the largest convention centres in Europe, just outside the city. It's obviously mostly focused on mobile technology, telecommunications, and all things connectivity. From an audience point of view, mobile network operators are obviously very present. Telecom infrastructure providers, smartphone providers and manufacturers, software developers, enterprise technology firms, they are there en masse. If you're not present at Mobile World Congress, if you come from one of those industries, it's where you got to be. Adam, what was your take on Mobile World Congress and any key insight?
I know we say it a lot, but AI is obviously a key thing from these events, but not just your chat GPTs, it's how AI is integrated to everything in tech. And it was really showcased amazingly well at MWC.
It was just so visible, wasn't it? Everywhere you looked, every large-scale story or message that was being broadcast was largely focused on AI. It almost felt like if you weren't talking about AI, that you were sort of your tech wasn't as cutting edge as the next brand alongside you. But as a key focus for the show, it had to be AI. I think we can both agree on that.
Yeah.
5G is still a very present topic. They're still pushing that technology, the large brands. A lot of focus on network infrastructure and mobiles, again, smart cities and how all of the power and the technology of what these brands are showing up with, it was quite inspiring, actually.
We were talking about earlier about the how they send the message across the whole of the stand. It's not just focusing on AI. There's lights, there's bells and whistles and all these large scale stands, but it's not just for the sake of it. There's a whole story behind everything they're saying, and it's clear that's the best way to utilize the space.
Yeah, actually, when you talk about how those stories are presented, it was very impressive. The amount of planning, time, effort that goes into how they were addressing all aspects of a brand experience, from obviously booth design, content, product displays, how all their various business units were present, but also interconnected.
Yep.
And it was actually, you could stand back sometimes and sort of take stock of the entire stand and really try to analyze how they'd achieved. Some of the stands were over 6,000 square meters, so you really had to have a good vantage point to take it all in. Almost, it was pretty awesome.
Whilst having all the bells and whistles, flashing lights, which it seemed like there was a lot of, sometimes the booths that did kind of stray away from that kind of had a measure of calm about them, and that was also quite prevalent across a couple of the stands that we went to, that it allowed people to step away from the
chaos of LED displays everywhere. Yeah, absolutely. And you can't blame brands for showing up like that.
No.
With the most enormous LED canvases on multiple levels, so many different unique formats that were all connected, and it was super impressive. But if one stand was in isolation from the next, it would have been more impressive, because when you have multiple stands all activating in the same way with LED content, on steroids, it becomes quite busy in the show, and to actually step onto a booth where it's got a degree of calmness, and they actually have, by design, reduced the amount of LED displays on their stand. So it is definitely a theme. But I think in terms of the show, biggest key takeaway would definitely be AI, all things AI, messaging, demos, and interactives. But the other things that really were present at the show were drones. There was a lot of unmanned, vehicles, drones, whatever we call them. There was obviously some large-scale physical drones that you could actually sit in, which I believe are actually operational now, beyond the drones that you can order a coffee and it'll be brought to you.
I know.
But drones was a big one. Noticed that.
Yep.
I did enjoy going onto the Oracle booth
Yeah,
and
I think
sitting
you can
inside the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
Hadn't been inside of one of those yet, and again, it had all of the dashboard that maybe an optimized Cybertruck would have, not one that you'd buy as a consumer, but at the press of a button, you could release a drone from the back of the vehicle.
Yeah.
And it could fly ahead of you and give you a live feed to what you're about to drive into.
It's showcasing the technology, but you're in a physical vehicle. It's not just showcasing it on a screen. They had the vehicle there so you can really understand how it affects you in the real world. Or that's more relatable, I think, than just seeing screens and flashing lights. It's something that's tangible that people can almost touch. And maybe it's going back to takeaways. These are the things that resonated with me. And I think, talk about the Ericsson stand, the amount of people queuing up to get on the tram.
Yes.
It's a physical box.
Yeah.
But it feels like you're doing something. So from an experiential point of view, those are the ones that really stand out.
You and I were mesmerised, just stood there. I think we found ourselves stood there for about 10 minutes before we were like...
Yeah, I know what you're going to say.
Oh, yeah. We were basically watching a marble run, weren't we?
Yeah.
That was the size of an entire side of a booth. It was absolutely ginormous, but it was a lovely example of blending physical with digital, because they had a very bespoke marble run that was talked to the different business units, and the brand story was woven in there somehow. But I think just as a visual thing, watching these series of marbles run down a very sort of interesting course, but then they'd hit a section which then the ball disappeared, but it would reappear on screen as a piece of digital content, and then it would reappear as a physical marble and keep running. And it was just mesmerizing to watch. It didn't really have any true meaning, probably beyond just visually being an attractor.
And again, it comes back to not being flashing lights. It was quite soothing and quite calming, and just having that, even if it was in the background of your stand, and you can have a conversation with someone and they've got that in the background, it's quite a smooth, soothing kind of a piece of content. And it was mesmerizing.
I think there was another brand that you and I went on where there's just an enormous red button, and for anyone, my intrigue is definitely, I'm the person that wants to go up and press the red button. So I did, and it was pretty cool. The fact that they've got all of these amazing canvases above head, using the ground, all different unique canvases, formats, different shapes, basically to display content. But what happened, Adam, when we pressed the red button?
I think it controlled the whole stand. The whole stand changed to a whole whooshing effect, whether it was playing music or just sending a wave across. It would start from the bottom and go reach up to the ceiling all the way across, even on the columns in the hall, I think it was. So it was cool, like you say. It's who wants to press the red button, but it gave you the control.
I wouldn't want to be a staff member working.
No,
on that,
it was quite loud.
10 seconds, some other person comes up and presses the red button. Loud. But it was pretty cool that all of that technology can be triggered by one member of a visitor on the stand, and it gives you that control. It's just memorable. I think ultimately
that's exactly what it is.
Simply that it's just a memorable thing. So I think whoever executed that was good.
Well, like you say,
good idea.
It's creating that experience. So we're talking about creative tech and creative technology. Is there anything that caught your eye there that you thought?
There was definitely. I think the biggest thing that all the brands seemed to do well was connected storytelling across multiple canvases, synchronized content, multiple content states, but with really unique shapes and sizes beyond what I'd seen before. I think that was probably the differentiator. So I was super impressed by the creative tech meets content piece, and the storytelling and the narratives and the amazing crafted content. No visibles, just stock footage. There was an emphasis on excellent content, and that I think really, really stood out as the biggest way the brands were differentiating themselves from the next, which was really powerful. There was different executions of content, talking about, yes, we've got flat LED surfaces and lots of different configurations, but then you would have maybe sometimes a unique central feature, which in many cases seemed to be the trend that they'd adopted the sphere, and they were utilizing that in a really interesting way. So there'd be multiple states transitioning through, and suddenly, like the sphere, you'd get the big yellow face with the winking eye, but then it would transition into something more visual. So yeah, that shape was impressive, and the way it was largely suspended or just featured in the middle of the booth.
Yeah.
I think the Huawei anamorphic display was definitely the standout execution of anamorphic content. You can see that over time it was introduced, brands were getting used to how to execute content in that way, and sometimes maybe it wasn't super impressive. Actually, there was one perspective where you did get the sense of anamorphic content, but it didn't feel like it was exploding out at you necessarily. Whereas Huawei, they must have invested in that and really crafted it, because stood in front of that display was mesmerizing. And I was fixated on it for about 5 or 10 minutes just to see what happened next. And these weren't short sequences. These were like 2-minute impressive sequences, and then it looked like it was actually part of the actual booth structure, because suddenly the whole wall in content would shut, and then you got used to that looking like it was just part of the booth again. And then immediately something would ripple and the whole sequence would play out. Nokia again had a really cool anamorphic display that you really caught as you were coming down the main thoroughfare. Which stood out visually, because a lot of the other sort of overhead branded presence like Qualcomm had an amazing transparent LED, and it was huge. You couldn't miss it. And even though transparent LEDs are not new news, I think it's still, you can't help but be impressed when it was executed at scale. But yet it's when you are on the main thoroughfare, isn't it? You look down and you can just see all the brands. And I think it was at that point where I thought, even though Nokia was kind of right at the end, you could still really see what they were doing through this anamorphic display that they had. But when you got up close to Nokia, and this was another trend that I noticed, was that booths have become more almost like an immersive room experience, where you're stood on the, where you step onto the booth, and there's either a corner or an actual immersive room. But the investment in technology, the crafting, as we know here at 2Heads, to develop an immersive room is so precise. So it was really interesting to see that playing out on a multiple scales. I think there was a couple of stands that just felt like the entire stand was an immersive room, because every wall, floor, ceiling was content.
I was just intrigued when I came to the show this year to see how brands maybe utilize the space a little bit differently, and I'll be honest, a lot of them didn't. There wasn't much different from last year in terms of the brands that are in the main spaces. The one that did stand out was Nokia, being that they took 50% of the space that they had last year. Which was, I mean, you don't often get that, a brand or a company
of that stature, of that
magnitude, and also it's not looked on positively usually, because they look someone taking less
half
space.
The presence of last year. What's happened to the company? What's the reason behind that?
But speaking to them, they said we don't need it. It was too much space. From a sustainability point of view, we didn't need all that space. We can do just the same kind of business that we're doing last year in the space that we've got. It still looks great. It was a fantastic booth, and it's really interesting to see that from a brand, from someone within the events team on the brand side, go, that's how we want to make a difference.
And make a point of it, be proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And actually it's a part of their CSR, it's part of their strategy.
It's quite refreshing, because all of these large-scale booths, I mean, from a sustainability point of view, they can't be highly sustainable, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it comes down to how many people are they bringing, and actually the cost of travel in terms of sustainability and the CO2 impact of that. That actually, if you're bringing less people, then technically, support's not having as big a booth.
Exactly. So that was interesting. But yeah, from coming to the show again, it was just to see what's being done differently in terms of how people are using their own space, not comparing too much one to another, because everyone's different. Just how they, repurposing their space.
It's interesting you talking about comparison to how brands showed up previous years, because my biggest takeaway, and admittedly it was 2 years previous, was that Samsung again is such a large presence at Mobile World Congress, but yet on their main booth, if you like, in Hall 3, it was super open. It was a very impressive open booth with no walls in sight. You could step on at any perspective, and it was vast, and it had this very cool sweeping overhead structure which displayed some pretty epic animated content telling the story of Samsung Galaxy and promoting in particular the S25 Ultra with all of the AI features packed into that phone, which coincidentally I had just got before the show. So I found myself on that stand getting a few tips on how to use my AI features on my phone. It was just a good customer experience for me as a potential Samsung user. But actually the biggest thing I noticed was that 2 years ago they had a large internal experience where you stepped into the Samsung environment, you walked through multiple interesting sequences of demos, and they really went to town on demonstrating the power of Samsung. Whereas on this show, it felt very much more like a collection of sort of genius bars. There wasn't a lot of elements that were interactive. There was a few displays where you could sort of replicate the features on the phone, but it wasn't sort of aspirational in many ways, which I just thought was interesting. It looked great from afar. It drew you in, but actually they strategically moved away from having an entire like immersive experience that you step through. I think other brands did have that for sure. Did you have any other sort of brands that really caught the eye in terms of how they, the amazing use of creative technology or eye-catching, something that was a bit different?
The LG one was actually really interesting as well. It wasn't just, I'll just watch this video and get a tick. It was actually quite interactive. And I mean, the one that stood out was the voice recording.
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
It was really, really interesting. And again, I mentioned about hearing my own voice. It was how AI can, one, record your voice and play it back to you, saying a completely different sentence. Yeah. How scammers can hear you say one thing on a phone and literally within seconds completely change the sentence and actually use it to call other people, and hearing your voice
being manipulated in that way
sense
is scary.
It's so scary, and I mean, it took. It was
instant though.
I spoke into a microphone instantly. A call came through that sounded just like me, even though I hated the sound of that. But it came through straight away, and what LG was showing was how they've got a product that can flash up saying, we recognise this as AI. And that is, again, you're going to an event, maybe I'm not au fait with all the tech, but that's fascinating to me, and how it's AI, how it can be used in different ways. So yeah, that jumped at me. That stand, that kind of
execution of AI demo was really smart.
That demo. So I think the whole journey went on around the whole LG stand was really clever.
The thing I loved about that LG stand as well, the mini worlds they'd created. So they had like physical models. So it's like playing on the blending of tangible physical components that were overlaid with digital AR and AI overlays, just to make it more of an interesting experience. And the mini worlds they created and how they told the story of the capability of the LG products was really unique. And it wasn't there was just one central experience. They used the same language and the same approach for relaying their capabilities across various business units using the same methodology. But it was just really nicely executed. So it had like transparent display in front of a mini world, and lots of things were playing out as you triggered a sequence. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good one in terms of that. One final swing back to technology was all about AR. It's the HoloLens, the goggles, the wearables, the HTC Vive booth, as well as Qualcomm and one or two others. They definitely the table where ultimately, unless you're wearing headsets, was blank. But of course, by the time you had about 6 or 7 or 8 participants wearing headsets, they were very much immersed in in experience, and it was very much a hosted, shared VR experience. So that was a trend. We noticed quite a few booths executing that. But I think that's probably enough on what was the best executions of content, the most fun things that we did to sort of round off our time in Barcelona, other than a walk through the old town in the evenings, which was good fun. But going back to being at the show, the marble run, not the one that was on the wall, but the one that you competed in, was great fun, Adam.
And it caught your eye because there was people gathering around, but it wasn't a flashing screen. And what it was exactly what it says in the tin, a marble run. 6 people had to participate. Everyone got given a coloured marble. 3, 2, 1. They pressed the button, and then the marbles lifted up, and it ran down almost like a streetcar race that had been set out, which had cameras focused in, so you could see each point of each corner that the marbles were going down.
Yeah, like through the tunnels.
Through the tunnels.
Like mini cameras showing you the route of the marbles. So it was like so well crafted. Wasn't it?
Very well crafted, and it was again going back to the non-tech side, non-flashing lights. It was just your plain old marbles. You can't get any more old school than that, really.
And I won. And I picked the yellow ball, and mine came in first. And I got the chocolate medal. So
I got a chocolate medal as well.
I got popcorn. I don't think you got popcorn.
No.
I got popcorn.
No, I didn't.
And a little card that my face and it celebrated my win.
We should get an image of it somewhere.
Yeah. So yeah, that was really fun. And then we visited Amdocs as well.
Yep.
And at the conclusion of that, again, where we were talking about AI, I think this was a lovely one that my children were devastated that I didn't get them a T-shirt. But we went up to the stand and we were encouraged to go and interact with these displays. And ultimately, you could sort of put in anything you wanted. For me, because of I didn't have long to decide, I went with a snow leopard with sunglasses on, which is pretty random, must say, but the result was really, really cool. And you could choose whether it was pop art or illustration, and within 5 minutes you had a T-shirt printed with your design on it, which was a really nice takeaway.
Yeah, it was, and it was, again, it's unique to you. So every single thing you take away, anyone that comes on to that booth and has a go at that, they know that piece is theirs. And it's completely different to what anyone else has received. So very cool idea.
What did you get on your T-shirt, Adam?
Mine had a bionic head with the 2 heads emblazoned across. And I wore it the next day at the event. So
excellent.
Showcase my love for 2 heads.
Living and breathing the brand. No, it was an epic trip.
It was.
Highly recommend it for anybody who's not been to Mobile World Congress. I think it's an inspiring show. You can't help but be impressed by the organisation, the layout, and just the scale. I think ultimately the scale is phenomenal. I'd highly recommend anyone at 2Heads or anyone out there to visit the latest and greatest in terms of content, digital, technology, storytelling, and immersive. It really is present at Mobile World Congress.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next year already.
So with that said and done, adios, till next year. If you enjoyed this conversation, please do like and subscribe. We'll have more content coming soon.